afternoon. Everyone hear me okay? Good. It's always good to be introduced by your former boss. Great to see some familiar faces in the room. I'm looking forward to the discussion today. I was reflecting before I get into the actual talk that this conference is 10 years anniversary. If you think about cell therapy and where we've come over the last 10 years, it's really been a 10-year journey. So from a modality and as a therapy for patients, our roles as CMC leaders is to make sure these molecules and these medicines make it to patients. And I think what drove me to Kite is really about the opportunity for the cure. And I think through the slides today, I'll dive deep into kind of an overarching business enterprise level view of Kite. I'll talk about tech ops and how we've organized ourselves and what makes that differentiated. And I'll talk a little bit about some vector internalization, which I haven't seen many presentations on at this conference this year, but is an integral part into delivering this medicine for patients. And then I'll end with a look ahead as far as our pipeline and where we're headed over the next several years. So when I came to Kite, this has actually been updated this year. It was singularly focused on achieving cures in cancer, and now we're looking beyond cancer as well. And it's really about harnessing the power of cell therapy and making sure that we're able to deliver this to patients. It was science fiction years ago, and now it's becoming more mainstream. An interesting fact that I've learned since being at Kite is of the 10 patients who are eligible to receive CAR T therapy, only 2 out of those 10 actually get the therapy. So there's still a lot of work to be done on making sure that we can get this therapy to the patients who need them. To deliver on that promise, we've decided as a business to vertically integrate our functions to really deliver on the promise of cell therapy. So internalizing and being able to kind of control our destiny, especially in the tech ops area, has been critical to the success of the business. And I think it differentiates us. And I know competitors and other companies are doing and following the Kite model, which is great to see, but we were the first to do this in the industry. A brief history of that experience, if you will. 2009, it was founded. 2015, FDA breakthrough designation was a huge milestone for the business. A lot of interest, obviously external as well. It was acquired by Gilead in 2017. That was a very critical point in the history of Kite. A lot of folks who got that product, which eventually became Yescarta, to be approved, invested a lot of energy and resource to make that science fiction into reality. And over the last 10 years, like I mentioned, we've been able to commercialize 2 products, Yescarta and Tecartus, and as of 2025, proud to say that we've reached over 32,000 patients globally with this medicine. So that scale is quite impressive, and coming from a small company and to be able to deliver that is extremely important, and that's our obligation to ensure that 32,000 becomes 100,000. That's really our ambition for 2030. So by the numbers, I mentioned the number of patients treated. We have 2 products, 5 approved indication. We have over 4,000 employees that work at Kite. Investments as far as capital, we've made a significant amount of investments in that infrastructure, over 1 million square feet of cell therapy manufacturing space as well as R&D space, and we're approved and reimbursed in 29 countries globally. So it's a big enterprise, big responsibility. To be able to do all that, it requires a network. And again, as I was joining Kite in 2021, this was in process. We had our initial facility in El Segundo, right next to LAX. We were in the process of building and opening a facility in Frederick, Maryland. That's actually now approved now and producing therapies. In Amsterdam, that construction was just completing, and we have now supplied primarily all of Europe out of that area, Middle East as well. And then in Oceanside, while I was at Kite as well, in 2022, we got approval for a vector facility that's just up the road in Oceanside for our products. So again, the investments that Kite has made over the years, I think a lot of that is, the financial means to do that with a parent company like Gilead helps, but it's really set the model for how I think we can scale out cell therapy, and other companies are replicating this as well. This year, we did open a depot in Tokyo. That's extremely important around turnaround time, so we can ship in queue product from our facility in El Segundo to Japan. So it's a big market, a big opportunity, and actually release product in Japan now through that depot. Another key part of this whole cell therapy business and getting access to patients is the treatment centers. So we're proud of the work and tech ops qualifying these centers, big part of the role. 160 sites in the US have been approved to treat patients with cell therapy for our products. And globally, outside of the US, over 410 treatment centers. So that's a quite significant investment to be able to actually reach into areas of the world that patients can receive this therapy. And we're also on this journey, and we heard about it last night at the panel discussion about getting into more of the community practice. That's the next thing I think that's going to unlock the potential for not 2 out of 10, but hopefully much larger number of patients accessing these therapies in the future. So kind of shifting gears a little bit and talking about technical operations, really our job is to make sure that we make those therapies available for those patients following that mission of potentially curing disease. And how do we do that? Shouldn't be novel to anyone in the room, but there's really those 4 pillars of tech ops. And for Kite, our focus on working with research and getting those cutting edge discoveries into a process that can be robustly manufactured is a key focus of process development, as well as improving the process. Manufacturing, again, setting the standard. We like to be agile, we like to be reliable, and we like to be efficient. And as we think about the subsequent slides, I'll get more into the manufacturing area. On the quality side, ensuring that the patients have a pathway to access these therapies is critically important. The testing and release, the qualification of the ATC centers, and then our supply chain team, the logistics of ensuring that that network of ATCs has access and we can reliably supply with estimated ready dates, turnaround times that are world-class. Our supply chain team does a great job making sure that works flawlessly, even in the midst of canceled flights. Cell therapy manufacturing 1.0. So again, as I reflected on my talk, this is, it was when I joined, kind of getting out of this phase, but this was the initial getting this out to patients and making this science fiction into reality. It was a clinical scale process. These are very manually, process, working in a BSC, open processing, a lot of labor required to do this. But it worked, and we were able to scale that reliably through those investments I mentioned, and that really opened up this as a potential, could become a mainstream type of therapy for patients. Maintaining that data integrity, I will say we've been on that journey since I've joined. A lot of paper-based records, now we're fully electronic, so that opens up the ability. I know we talked a lot about AI and being able to leverage data. I think for the more mature businesses, 100%, it makes a lot of sense. We're on that journey ourselves, but we're just at the beginning, right? So this is something that's going to take time to evolve, but getting that data electronically to have access, do real-time deviation management is part of our journey as well. And then we'll also mention, the consumables and the equipment that was available at the time that Kite launched its products, they were not designed for cell therapy, right? We were borrowing from the blood bank business and, things that were beyond what this therapy now is today, and we've worked a lot with our suppliers to make sure we can improve the robustness of those materials. So this is a cost curve, investing, really on how to make sure that the access is not limited by cost. And I think a lot of folks have probably, in their business and companies, have done this business development assessment of what does it cost to make these therapies, and how come Kite has been successful in this. Again, we have our pillars of where we focus on ensuring that we can improve that cost curve. I will say volume is the biggest friend to your cost. You can imagine if you have these fixed assets and the labor that's required to produce those therapies, you need to optimize that for the volume, and volume is your friend. And that's really the steep part of the curve. Now where we're at it is, how do we make sure that we can automate and reduce the amount of labor that's required, and that's the next journey of where Kite is headed, is really on how to bring those costs. It won't be as steep of a curve. Volume will still be your friend. Internalizing vector is another one. Really bring down the cost of a very costly raw material, if you will, that goes into the process. And making sure that we are smart with our investments. In our Maryland facility, We built that from the ground up in Maryland, and it has capacity to double what is there today that's installed. So that's a great kind of building that's just sitting waiting for the volumes to increase. And similarly in Europe, we also have an exact replica of the facility we're in today that we've leased to enable that expansion if it's needed as we increase the number of patients we're serving. So again, strategically thinking about that footprint is important. So where are we headed? I think for the next 5 years, let's just say, we're obviously looking at more juvenile cells, right, in the cell therapy process. These are more potent cells. Those require lower doses. So again, you're thinking about, how can you, innovate in that space to make sure that you're delivering on the promise of the next generation of products. Simplified and more compact manufacturing operations. One of the benefits of having the footprint we have is, in the space, is we can think about densification within those facilities and how to optimize that with the footprint that we have. Inline, at-line testing, I feel like we're going back 20 years in the biologics world here now. Is like, how do we get real-time data? But that's also an innovation that's coming. The rate limiting step in a lot of the release of these products is your transduction assay, right, before you harvest your product. So, thinking about how to automate that and actually get it on the floor is a big focus. Rapid automated analytics. We've improved our turnaround time through partnerships with companies on sterility testing. We can now do 5-day release for sterility. It's a big improvement of what it was. Fully integrated data management, just talked about that. I think, having review by exception when it comes to deviations and looking at your batch records and making sure that you can, in real time, make decisions on progressing and releasing those products. And machine learning. Again, I think we're probably a few years away from really harnessing its capability within the cell therapy space. It is so new. And again, I think any innovator in medicine or any space, your obligation is to make sure it's successful. And I think we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves while that adoption and recognition of this as a curative therapy, a cure, that's incredible. We don't want, and that's an obligation we take seriously. We want to make sure we're doing the right investments at the right time. So just to look at our capacity, this is just a graph to show kind of what I described earlier, our 3 sites. We are in a semi-automated process currently in Maryland. We're transitioning to a semi-automated process in Europe. In California, that facility, the first facility we have up in El Segundo, is really at the capacity it needs to be, and it's really going to be our launch site. And as we think about our pipeline and what we're doing in pivotal and then launching, that's going to be a critical node in our network. And that flexibility of cross-licensing, and I learned this at my days in Amgen, is really critical to ensure you have a robust supply chain. And again, that's part of our strategy as well, is to make sure these facilities are able to be cross-licensed, business continuity concerns, disruption, supply, changes that you need to do in your facility. Having that flexibility is a blessing at Kite, and it's actually served us very well in the time that I've been there. Here we go. I talked about partners. So I was approved to list some key names up here. It's a strategic partnership, and this is a kind of a novel space, right? This is has been a very manual process. How do you automate that? These are our key partners right now at Kite that we're working with: Cytiva, Miltenyi, Rapid Micro, and bioMérieux. I can go through the equipment list that's in each one of those, but I do think it's a call to action as we're here at this conference and we see our vendors, that this is going to be a partnership, just like it was with single-use disposables and biologics. Those things needed partnerships to make them reality, and we're at that phase of where cell therapy is in its journey to make this more mainstream. Okay, I wanted to double-click a little bit on vertical integration, specifically around vector. And again, I think a lot of folks probably are familiar with the T-cell process, but the vector really is the secret sauce that makes the product a reality. And it starts in research, and it starts about how do we think about the constructs that we're screening for, and then infrastructure-wise in manufacturing, having the sites to bring those vectors to the product. So again, dedicated resources. We have a separate clinical vector facility actually in Santa Monica. It was on that earlier map slide that can produce clinical vector. We also, in Oceanside, are doing commercial manufacturing for vector. We're looking at LVV, and I'll talk about that in a second, as the next gen vector for Kite's products. But that's really a differentiator, we believe, is to actually control that within our four walls. So why did we use RVV? I see Tim Moore's in the audience, I think. That was a decision that was made earlier around in-licensing that, and basically having a very stable cell line that can be reproducibly with high titers for CD19, right? So that was a strategic decision. It's stable expression. It's everything you'd want in a vector. Its limitations, however, is really around the payload. And you think about what that vector platform can deliver from a payload perspective. It's not a lot of genetic material. LVV is. And that's why we're pivoting into the LVV space. So really, it's around the transduction efficiency, the larger payload capacity. You'll see we have armored cars now. So we're putting multiple bicistronics, tricistronics, armored cars into our pipeline programs. And LVV is that gateway into which those larger payloads can actually be delivered. And again, I think think about internalization. It looks more traditionally like a biologics in the sense of the processing that was required, bioreactors, waves, disposal reactors, purification, chromatography. So again, getting that built as an engine within Kite has been a focus of process development, is now coming into manufacturing. Complexity, robust toolbox, and continuous learning. Again, I feel like I'm going 20 years back to the biologics space, but vector is difficult in a lot of ways in the sense of, its comparability of when you make a process change. You can be on the edge potentially, if you're not thoughtful about what you're doing, of having a construct that works and then you make something that doesn't work. And obviously, there's examples in the business community as well as companies who've had promising phase 1 data and then made a change and didn't work in phase 2, right? Or phase 2 pivotal. So that kind of understanding of what is so critical about vector is something at Kite that we're very much focused on. The toolbox, the analytical tools that are needed to characterize and understand the critical quality attributes of vector is something that's critical for this industry and for Kite. Leveraging the learnings, right? We have great analytical development folks that have biophysical backgrounds in testing and method development opportunities to really bring that knowledge into the LVV space. Comparability, I mentioned about it, but really it's that interplay between the CAR construct and the T cell and what we don't know, right, about how that gets integrated. So really thinking about advanced analytical technologies to strengthen those assessments. We are internalizing vector for our pipeline. That includes bringing in-house vector that's been sourced externally currently and getting those into patients. So again, it's been a journey, and I will say if there's one thing that keeps me awake at night in my role today, it's on the vector side. I think the T cell side, we're in a very strong place. It's the vector side that I get nervous about. And again, I think Kite and Gilead are making that investment in the business to ensure that we're able to make these reliably in the future. And we wouldn't be able to do this without a team. So I wanted to acknowledge that, of the 2,600 staff that sit within technical operations, we have a very highly engaged and motivated workforce. A former site head at Kite, the best part of my job, I love this job now too, but being on site with those staff that are making these products, literally touching patients in their hands every day, is inspiring. And these are very, highly, educated, well-crafted technicians that work in our facilities. They show up every day committed. Some of the working operations, as we're now closing and automating the process, are getting better as far as gowning. But working 5 hours in a bunny suit is not the best way of enjoying your work. So getting out of that and really focusing on our staff has been a big passion of mine while I've been at Kite. And really, we're all committed to the goal of curing disease, and literally that feeling of holding a patient's cells in your hands, I don't think it can be beat. So where are we today? Really, we're growing our share, right? So again, as you think about a class of products, very much focused on making sure that we're growing that class. Again, 2 out of 10 is not acceptable. So how do we ensure we're doing that? Near term, we have a lot of excitement about multiple myeloma. So we're actually in the process, we publicly disclosed, we're going to be filing our application and launching next year in that space. So huge opportunity for patients there. We have some very promising data. We bought a company, Community, based out of UPenn, a glioblastoma asset. We're actually improving that CAR construct currently, as well as we're looking at autoimmune. So again, it's not just the cancer oncology portfolio, but expanding beyond. And then positioning ourselves for pivots. We just made an acquisition for Interius and in vivo, so thinking about that as the next delivery system. Again, probably 4 or 5 years away, but really being able to pivot to these new technologies as they mature and looking for opportunities to partner. So our pipeline, I think it's quite impressive. When I started, it didn't look like this. We have a great research team. Flavius, who's the head of research at Gilead, oncologist by training, is also working closely with our head of research at Kite and their teams collectively on some of these centers of excellence, especially on things like solid tumors and autoimmune. But you'll see the list of pipeline of where we are. Again, B-cell malignancies, that's where we started. Multiple myeloma next year, autoimmune, let's see. And then the solid tumor space, I think, is extremely exciting. And really these armored CAR constructs are going to be extremely important to get the efficacy that we need. And again, our scientists and engineers that are doing this development work, hats off. This is a lot of reimagining what this could be in the future and the investments that are needed to make this successful. So I did touch on this just to close that out. We have acquired a company, Interius. We are very much interested in this. Obviously, there's big benefit from a patient access perspective as well as an overall cost, you can imagine. But the complexities, I think, are still in its infancy. If we think autologous cell therapy is, 10 years old? We have some time to incubate on this, but I think there's a lot of hope and promise for what this could mean as the next phase of cell therapy for patients. And I'll just leave you with this. Again, branding a little bit of what we're doing in manufacturing. We are reliable, we are agile, reliable, and efficient. And again, I think that focus of thinking about this as a more mature company as we're bringing these new products into the market is going to be critical to our success. So in all aspects of the science and the engineering and how we think about supplying patients, these 3 elements show up. And this is how I ladder up my team's goals and whatnot for the manufacturing organization. And with that, thank you.